Check the description for the following discount codes. You find me stood amongst the parts of a GT Omega Titan cockpit today. I'm finally going to get round to getting this assembled. Some of you will have seen it in the background in some other videos. So I've got it all laid out on the floor here, got it all unboxed. I must say I'm a big fan of the look of tubular cockpits. I'm yet to find out whether they're as rigid as, say, something like aluminium profile, but they do look nice. It's a more front room friendly aesthetic, I think, than the more industrial look of an aluminium profile cockpit. So that's quite cool. So far everything looks pretty solid, pretty sturdy. The only thing I may have some reservations about is the way this pedal tray mounts. Its angle adjustment perhaps is going to give way to flex, but I also think we may have the option to just bolt a pedal tray straight to the bottom there if you're not someone that needs to angle it, which would solve that issue. If it even is an issue, we'll find out later. The shifter mount looks okay. The wheel deck, albeit it's quite small, it looks pre-drilled for all your usual bits and pieces, and it's quite heavy and reasonably thick as well. So we'll see how that does. Again, that goes, sort of fits on here, which is welded to the tubular sections, but we'll do a proper walk around anyway. A couple of the comments I've seen around the world about this cockpit is that the instructions aren't very clear. So I'm just going to give you a little close-up of these. I don't really think there's any issue with the instructions, apart from whoever put them together can't count, because after you go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, you usually go 8, 9 rather than use another 7. But we won't hold that against whoever decided to put these together. But it looks pretty simple. You know, the first thing you do is put the feet on. That's obviously pretty easy. Then you screw your wheel deck on, and then you screw your pedal tray on. It tells you what bolts you need, M8 by 16, M8 by 16, and then you do the shifter mount on the side, and then we go around the back here, you grab the seat and you slide the runner all the way forward, and then you bolt the rectangular piece on using M8 by 35s, and then you slide that all the way back, and then you bolt it to the rig. So yeah, I don't think they're complicated at all, but I did see a couple of people saying that they were. But then again, I build a lot of cockpits, so maybe it's not complicated to me. Maybe some other people do find it complicated. But yeah, I'll get this thrown together and a little bit of a sped up build montage, and then we'll have a little look around, get some gear on it, get it tested. Let's roll. Well, we're fully assembled, which took me about 30 minutes, I reckon. So not actually very long. It was super easy to put together. The instructions were fine. There's no obviously accompanying text on there, but the images show you where things need to go. It's very logical. I had no issues whatsoever. There's one thing, just one thing. Yeah, one thing I don't like, and I'll show you a close up in a minute when we do a little walk around, is that there's a rectangular bracket that the seat bolts to. I showed you that earlier. That then bolts to the rear half of the cockpit. Now, it uses M6 bolts to go through this rectangular piece into the back half of the cockpit. Now, M6 is fine, but the holes drilled in the back half of the cockpit that you put the M6 bolts through are M8. So if it wasn't for the fact that the M6 nuts are serrated with a flange like that, they would actually have just come straight through the holes, and you wouldn't have been able to bolt the seat frame, I suppose we might call it, in place. Now, because it's got those serrated nuts, it's fine. There's a couple of mil clearance all the way around, or overlap, sorry, all the way around, and they do up tight, and there's no problems at all. You could, of course, use a couple of washers on that underside, again, to make that sort of flanged area on the nut even bigger and spread the load. I think that's what I would do if I was to be using this as my main rig, just because why not? Washers are cheap. Other thing you could do would be to drill out the M6 holes in the seat frame to M8 and use M8 bolts. But I will reiterate, it does work fine as it comes. You don't need to do either of those. That's just me being a bit picky and also wondering what bell end decided to drill M8 holes when they should be M6. But you know, maybe it was a mistake, maybe yours won't be like that. But anyway, it does work fine, it's not an issue, just something I thought I'd point out. Did I notice anything else that I need to mention whilst putting this together? No, I don't. I mean, when you're bolting that seat frame to the underside of the seat, I always do it without having first affixed the top half of the seat, because it makes it much easier to maneuver. You know, you slide your runners forward, put your bolts in, slide your runners back, put your other bolts in. They're a little snug to get through past the bottom of the seat, but the seat is foam, so you can just squish them past. And then I bolt the bottom half of the seat with the seat frame to the cockpit, and then I put the top half of the seat on last. Now, speaking of the seat, this is one of the GT Amiga RS XLs, XL RSs, whichever way around it is, I can't remember now. This is their top of the line seat. There's the RS9 immediately below it, and then below the RS9, the RS6. I have got a video coming comparing the RS6 to the RS9, and I will do a video comparing the RS9 to the RSXL or XLRS, whichever it is, this one here, where I do all the measurements and everything, because they're different sizes, they're different shapes, and I do have some recommendations, at least so far, about the previous two. I'm sure I'll have some about this as well. But I do like the way it looks. Construction and materials look the same as all the other GT Amiga seats, which is absolutely fine. I've got no issues with those. I've ran one for over 3 years and it hasn't worn or torn or ripped or anything, so no complaints there. And I quite like the fact that it's all black with just a little bit of stitching here and there. Quite stealthy with this Titan cockpit as well. Now, Titan is a strong name, so we're going to want to hope it lives up to that strong name. So far, I can already say this feels rock solid. There is no side to side, there is no up and down, you know, with this piece here for the wheel deck at all. I could probably already go so far as to say, as long as this piece that we bolt our steering wheel to is strong enough, the frame itself would have no issues with a direct drive wheelbase, I don't think. Having now got one and having used one. But we'll see whether this does or not. That's going to be the real issue. But let me grab the camera and give you a little close-up whilst I'm rabbiting on about these individual things. So yeah, like I said, I like this sort of stealthy, all black appearance, and the tubular design is definitely a bit more sort of living room friendly than the more industrial look of my Prime in the background there. And to be honest, and oh, actually the 6 feet on here, right? Not only do they adjust up and down, they kind of articulate round like this. So should you have an uneven surface, you'll be able to get it nice and level, which is quite cool. I like that. I wasn't super keen on the way the two sections join together, not in the way that they slot together, but the way that we just have 4 bolts at the top and there's another 4 underneath with these little plates. There's nothing wrong with the way they function, I just didn't think it looked very pretty, to be honest. When you've got a nice tubular finish, it would have been nice to think of I can't think of a better idea off the top of my head, but it would have been nice if there was a better idea. Now, the pedal tray is actually quite thick and quite hefty. I'll flip this all over in a second, we'll show you the underneath, but there is bracing across and down the sides. And the way you can adjust the angle, you've got pre-drilled holes here, and there's actually another hole here that you can't quite see with a thread in. So you'd end up with 2 bolts through 2 of these sort of 5 holes holding it in place. It might actually be more rigid than I was expecting. And then we've got pre-drilled holes all along here for sliding the whole thing forwards and backwards. I've only thrown 2 bolts in because until I get my pedals, I don't know where I want it. There's no sort of backwards and forwards adjustment in the cockpit itself. Its footprint is what its footprint is. The seat, of course, slides backwards and forwards. The pedal tray, as you just see, has a fair bit of adjustment in it. There's also no height adjustment for our wheel deck. As you can see, that tubular section that leads up to here is solid. There's no adjustment in it. So as far as adjustment for the wheel deck goes, you've got a slot here and a slot here. So you've got adjustment this way and you've got adjustment up and down like that. So there is a reasonable amount of movement, but depending on your individual size and shape, maybe it won't be enough for you. I would say I'm an average size guy height-wise, so we'll see. You know, if I can fit comfortably in this without any issues, it means it would probably accommodate shorter people and taller people without too much trouble either, unless of course you are in one of the extremes. Now, seat height adjustment, there isn't any. These are welded to the bottom piece of tube here, and this is that sort of seat frame that I referenced earlier with your M6 bolts in. That's just fixed there as well, so there's no up and down adjustment. Let me flip this over. Actually, we'll get round here. I'll just show you the shifter mount. Shifter mount goes up, down, in and out, forwards and backwards on its various adjusters. Again, I've left it loose because I haven't bolted my shifter to it yet. There is a brace down the centre here, which is not easy to see, but let's see if we can just get it under there. Probably can't see it, but there is one under there, and then there's a 90-degree lip at the front here, so it feels pretty solid. I think if there's any weakness or wobble in this, it's going to be because there's so many different pieces slotted into one another. But we'll see. I mean, what would have been nice is to see some plastic collars that slot into the top of these bits that this then slots down into, and the same for the others as well. Some of the other GT Omega products do have those, and that would help just sort of centralise it and remove any of the play that potentially could arise. But the way these screw up, you're screwing against this corner here, which will push this whole piece back into this corner here, and the same applies to all the other adjusters. So it's wedging it in place. It won't be able to move sideways or certainly not come forward. So probably actually a non-issue because they've chosen to do it that way, but I'm just thinking out loud. Anyway, let me just flip this over for you. Excuse the camera angles whilst I do this. There we go, we're over. So these are the articulating feet that I was talking about that will help you get it level, and there's the sort of joining brace underneath. Oh, one other thing they have done, you won't be able to see this, but where the shifter mount bolts on to the side here, there's actually vertical braces on the back side. So it's not just on the thickness of this material, it's actually reinforced with plate here and here on the inside. So that's quite a nice touch as well. Now, those M6 bolts for the seat frame that I was talking about are these here. You can see the hole is quite clearly M8, but because these these nuts are flanged, in fact that one's just pulled through a touch. So I'm actually going to put some washers on those, even though it is solid. I'm not happy with that. I'm going to put some bigger washers to spread the load, and that will cure that problem. So that is a negative. I would recommend you get washers and do the same. Aside from that, we've got bracing here for the pedal tray, and again 90-degree here and here, which all gives strength and reinforcement. Can we see under the pedal tray? Oh, we can a little bit. So pedal tray itself, braced across here, braced again a bit further inside there, and with our 90 degrees at the end. There's very little overlap, so we shouldn't get any flex there under normal use. And this is something we need to just briefly touch on. A lot of reviewers, including myself, will test things way beyond what I'm going to call normal use. So we'll bend things around, you know, like mad, just to sort of look for flex and twist and what have you, when in reality, when you're actually using it for its intended purpose, you don't suffer with any of what we may potentially force things to do whilst we're reviewing them. I referenced that briefly on the Prime cockpit over there when I watched another reviewer levering the crap out of the wheel deck and making it flex. And it's like, and it's all well and good. Metal will all flex if you give it enough leverage, but that isn't, of course, how you use it when you're driving or racing. So anyway, this is it all assembled. I think it looks pretty nice, to be fair. Construction seems solid. The only issue I see is those M6 bolts going through M8 holes, which I'll rectify with a couple of larger washers. So let's strap some Thrustmaster test equipment to it and take it for a spin in Dirt Rally. So before we do this little run, we'll just have a quick look at what I'm going to call my flex cam. I set up a camera at the side to monitor the flex of the shifter mount and the pedal tray, and even possibly the wheel deck. I believe that's in shot as well. So what you need to remember here when you're looking at this video is that I'm on really thick carpet, and I can make the cockpit kind of almost sway from left to right where it sinks into my carpet by just shifting my weight. So what you need to do when you look at this little clip is pay attention to the pedal deck relative to another part of the cockpit, not relative to the floor, because the whole rig just moves a little bit on my carpet. Even my aluminium profile one does, it's just because it's thick bloody carpet. So yeah, pay attention to the pedal deck moving relative to the cockpit. So there is a little bit of flex in the pedal tray when you brake hard, but it's very, very little. I did try this with the pedal tray inclined, and it's pretty much the same. There's a little bit more, but it's with these Thrustmaster pedals, it's not really enough to be an issue because they're plastic construction for the most part anyway, so there's a little bit of flex in those. Although in a perfect world, you'd have none. But you have to remember the price point. This is a £270 cockpit. That is really quite cheap for how solid the whole thing is. And I will say the whole thing is very solid. The wheel deck, again, has almost no noticeable flex. Well, there is no noticeable flex in use. If you physically force it and look from the side, yes, you can make a little bit. And even the shifter mount, again, if we watch the video, or if you've just watched the video, if it's finished now, you'll see there was pretty much no movement in the shifter mount either. So for 270 notes, or even less if you click through and use my discount code, this is a very good cockpit. And to be honest, if I was to be using something other than my aluminium profile rig, I'd probably use this because it's cheap and it's solid. All the pre-drilled holes fitted everything, the pedals, the steering wheel base and the shifter. There's enough, there's enough adjustment in everything. The height of this wheel deck, for me, is pretty much perfect. It's exactly where I'd want it. And there's actually a surprising amount of upward and downward adjustment using the sort of wheel deck here itself, even though these don't move. But yeah, I'm more than happy with it. So especially, as I say, we've got to bear in mind the price point always, So the next step up is an aluminium profile rig. It's more than double the money. So 270 notes, you really can't grumble. Or as I say, less with my discount. So let's just do a quick run here in dirt. Just because why not? Oh yeah, it's gonna be weird. My handbrake's a paddle, which I'm not used to now. Well, I'm not used to at all, in fact. And it's quite nice in some ways, going back to this Thrustmaster TSPC racer, having been on my Fanatic DD1 for a little while now. The shifter I'm totally not used to. There's no muscle memory for where the gears are whatsoever. But anyway, yeah, the cockpit, I really can't complain about it at all. For £270, I think it's a perfectly good recommendation from me. The only thing I will say about putting those washers on the M6 nuts, that's definitely got to be done. But aside from that, I have no complaints whatsoever. Oh, it feels so weird driving this after being with the Fanatic stuff. But not bad though. The wheel here itself still feels pretty good. It's just no muscle memory for where my gears are. And of course, cockpit puts everything in a slightly different place as well. Oh, get out the trees. Seats comfortable, no issues there. It's definitely the biggest of all the three seats that GT Amiga do, or at least it feels it. We'll see when I measure things up in another video. But it's more than comfortable. What gear am I in? Got no dashboard either. Oh well, there we go. That's enough mowing the lawn. Anyway, hopefully you've seen everything you need to see. We did use the camera to show the flex earlier anyway, so this is just a bit of a formality really. But yeah, for me this gets a thumbs up. There's definitely enough adjustment in the wheel deck to get it where you want it. There's plenty of room and adjustment in the seat, sliding backwards and forward. You've got no issues there. The pedal tray moves miles if you need it to. You can really get, and as does the shifter mount, you can really get things where you need to get it. It is very solid. You know, I ain't moving that. You know, these uprights here prevent it from flexing that way. And just the thickness of these tubes prevent any side to side movement. So yeah, and there's no lift under hard braking. Look, it doesn't raise up in the middle where it's joined. And you know, a tiny bit of flex in the pedal deck. I mean, I'm pressing reasonably hard. But as I said earlier in the video, in fact, I wouldn't actually use this sort of the pedal tray itself. I would bolt it straight down to this, because for me, I don't like my pedals being quite that high. So, you know, it's almost more getting towards a Formula style legs out position. And that's not how I normally have it. So I would actually just bolt this straight down to that, and that would eliminate the flex altogether, because this piece is pretty hefty. So you'd be fine. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything covered. Yeah, the only thing I would do, as I say, is put some washers for those 4 M6 bolts, one here and the same the other side. Everything else, really very good. Again, 270 quid, or a bit less with my discount. It's definitely a strong recommend. In fact, if I was looking at this versus the Art or the Art Pro, I think I would save that little bit of extra money and just buy this one. Kind of a do it once, do it properly type scenario, if you know what I mean. Especially if you know you're not going to go, you know, any higher in the future, although famous last words that is, isn't it? And then 3 years later we've all got bloody direct drive wheels and aluminium profile cockpits that we never thought we'd get. Anyway, that's by the by. There's my review of the GT Omega Titan. It is a thumbs up. It's all good as far as I'm concerned. Grab yourself a couple of washers if you need to, which you should. Aside from that, if you want one, definitely go get one. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, take it easy.